I got home around 6:30 that Friday evening, just when the sun starts to throw long orange lines across the kitchen floor, and the air inside smells a little like whatever someone microwaved 2 hours ago and forgot to cover. I remember slipping off my shoes like I always do, left then right, heel first, neatly against the wall, and dropping my keys into the bowl that's more decorative than useful. I even remember thinking, maybe I'll pour a glass of wine tonight, before I turned the corner and saw the mess that would shift everything inside me from calm to disbelief to rage in about 10 seconds flat. It was lying on the floor next to the coffee table, my laptop, angled in that very specific, unnatural way electronics only do when they've been thrown, dropped, or otherwise obliterated by someone who doesn't care if they break. The screen was shattered down the middle like a spiderweb had exploded from the center. One hinge was twisted upward like a broken finger, and the keyboard had a dent so deep it looked like someone had stomped it, maybe twice. And there was Landon. My brother. My younger by 14 years, chronically unemployed, charming when he needs to be, full-time burden of a brother, sprawled across the couch like a bored teenager after school. He was eating chips straight from the bag with one hand and holding the remote in the other, like he didn't even see the explosion of technology guts beside him. I stood there for a few seconds, waiting for the shock to settle into something coherent. It didn't. So I asked it plain and quiet, like I was reading a menu. "What the hell happened to my laptop?" He didn't even look up right away, just reached into the bag again and chewed while flipping through channels like he was searching for something more interesting than his own mess. Then, without even a blink, he said, "It slipped. Chill, Ness. They'll replace it for you, right? Work stuff's covered under insurance." That was the moment I knew this wasn't just some careless mistake. It was the nonchalance, the shrug, the way he wiped his hands on his jeans like my entire career wasn't currently lying in pieces 3 feet from his foot. And it was the fact that he called me Ness, like we were still kids, and this was just another little mess I'd clean up, because that's what big sisters do. "They?" I asked, but my voice cracked a little, and I hated that. "You mean my company? The one that didn't even buy this computer? The one I bought with my own money last summer after my divorce because I needed something fast and reliable." He finally looked over at me then, tilted his head like a golden retriever trying to understand human speech. "Damn, relax," he said, laughing a little. "It's not like you don't have backups. I mean, what were you even working on that's so important? Some emails." I could feel the rage climb up into my chest like hot water rising in a kettle, but I kept my face still. Years of customer service, client calls, corporate nonsense, it all trains you for this moment. When someone spits in your face with a smile, and you have to pretend you're not drowning in the urge to scream. "I hope you're joking," I said, crouching down to assess the damage. The frame had a visible crack in the corner. The ports on the left side were completely bent inward. It wasn't just broken. It was totaled. He reached over, grabbed the almond milk carton from the coffee table, my almond milk, the one I write my name on like we're in a damn college dorm, and took a long swig straight from the spout. "It's not a big deal, Ness," he said again, more slowly, like I was the one being unreasonable. "Seriously, just let Mom know and she'll talk to HR or whatever. She always fixes stuff like this." As if on cue, Cheryl floated in from the hallway, purse still on her shoulder, holding a grocery bag in one hand and her phone in the other. Her eyes flicked down to the floor, then over to me, then back to Landon. "What's all this?" she asked, not even bothering to sound alarmed. "He tripped," I said, nodding toward the mess. "I said it slipped," Landon corrected, not missing a beat. Cheryl gave a small sigh, not of concern, but of inconvenience. "Vanessa, it's a laptop. You'll get another. Just let it go. Honestly, I don't know why you always make things bigger than they are." My mouth fell open, but no words came out. I think some part of me still expected her to step in, to tell him to apologize, to maybe offer to help. But she just walked past me and started unpacking apples like we were in a sitcom, and the laugh track would cover the awkward silence. "Just let it go?" I repeated. My voice didn't even sound like my own. Landon was grinning. Full smug grin. Like he'd won something. And I realized right then, standing in that cheap linoleum kitchen with two people who were supposed to love me, that I was completely on my own. So I stood up, walked quietly past them both. Didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't throw anything even though my hands itched to. I went to my room, opened the second drawer of my nightstand, the one nobody ever opens because I've made sure they think there's nothing worth hiding there. Inside was a tiny black USB stick, just 2 inches long, but powerful. I held it between my fingers for a long moment, letting it rest against my palm like a match waiting for the right spark. I didn't say a word that night. Not one. But I plugged the USB into my desktop and hit play. The morning after the wreckage, I woke up with that kind of buzzing behind the eyes you get when your body's more angry than tired, like the adrenaline never really left your bloodstream overnight, and now it's just pacing circles in your chest. I didn't even sleep, not really, just laid there listening to the pipes creak and the soft hum of the fridge through the wall, playing back the security footage over and over in my mind like some sick rerun I couldn't turn off. There's something especially cruel about betrayal when it happens so close to home, inside walls that once made you feel safe. I walked into the kitchen around 7:30, already dressed for the day, hair tied up, no makeup, no small talk. Cheryl was flipping pancakes like this was Sunday brunch and not the aftermath of a personal disaster, wearing that pink housecoat with the coffee stain near the hem that she still swears isn't noticeable. The kitchen smelled like butter and syrup, like comfort food, but it all felt artificial, like someone spraying air freshener over a backed-up toilet. And there he was again, Landon, sitting at the table in the same wrinkled t-shirt as yesterday, looking smug and well-fed, scrolling his phone like he hadn't shattered my entire workload into tech confetti less than 12 hours ago. "Morning," Cheryl chirped, like nothing at all had happened, like this was some kind of happy sitcom where the theme song would cue up any second now. "I made your favorite blueberry this time. And turkey bacon, since you're watching cholesterol, right?" I ignored the plate she slid toward me and focused on the smug little bastard across from me, who didn't even flinch when I said, calmly and clearly, "You're going to pay for the laptop." Landon didn't look up from his phone. "What laptop?" I didn't blink. "The one you smashed. The one I bought. The one you owe me $1,500 for." He let out a laugh like I'd told him a joke with a decent punchline, finally putting the phone down and leaning back in the chair with his arms crossed, that same irritating grin painted across his face like graffiti on a church wall. "Vanessa," he said, stretching the name out like it was something stuck in his teeth, "you left it on the floor, next to the table." "Who does that?" "It's not my fault you keep your expensive crap where people can trip on it." Cheryl was at the stove, flipping another pancake, but I saw her shoulders tense just a little, just enough to let me know she was listening, just not planning to say anything useful. "I didn't leave it on the floor," I replied, biting each word off with slow, deliberate precision. "It was on the coffee table, where I always put it. You walked in, got mad about something, and then you broke it." He scoffed and looked at Mom like he was inviting her into the joke, some kind of casual courtroom drama where the defense attorney needed backup. "She's exaggerating again." I stubbed my toe, the thing fell, and now she's acting like I kicked a puppy. "I saw the footage," I said, lying straight through my teeth because I hadn't shown it yet, but I needed him to sweat a little. "You didn't trip. You grabbed it. You threw it. Then you opened the fridge like nothing happened." He froze for half a second, just long enough for me to catch the twitch in his jaw, and then he was back to smirking. "Look, even if it broke," he said, pretending now like he hadn't just denied everything, "those things are fragile as hell. You probably needed a new one anyway. And besides, don't you have a warranty or something? That's what they're for. Just file a claim." Cheryl finally chimed in, still not turning around, still scraping at the griddle like she was trying to clean her conscience with a spatula. "Sweetheart, maybe just let this one go. You know how clumsy Landon can be. Accidents happen. No sense in blowing it out of proportion." "Out of proportion?" I asked, Voice rising for the first time, just a hair louder than I intended. Mom, that laptop had all my client files, my reports, my contracts, everything. He didn't just break a machine. He wiped out my whole week. Maybe my whole month. She turned then, spatula in hand like it was a microphone in some bad improv routine. And what would you have me do, Vanessa? Yell at him? Make him sleep on the porch? You're grown. Handle it. And that's when I knew she wouldn't do a damn thing, not because she didn't believe me, but because she didn't want to believe anything bad about her precious boy. Landon could have set fire to the living room, and she'd probably ask what I did to upset him. There's a certain kind of blindness that mothers develop when it comes to sons who've never really earned their halo, but they wear it anyway because it makes Sunday mornings more comfortable. So I did something I hadn't done since I was a teenager and learned how to lie like it was a second language. I smiled. I sat down at the table, took a sip of the juice she'd poured, and said, "You're right." I overreacted. It's just a laptop. Landon relaxed instantly, not smart enough to register sarcasm unless it's dressed in neon lights. He went back to his phone, and Cheryl plated more pancakes like nothing had shifted. But something had. Because here's the thing, there was no warranty. There was no company-issued laptop. I bought that machine with my own money after my ex walked out, after I'd cried on the kitchen floor with a bottle of wine and an expired credit card. That laptop was mine, built from late nights and freelance gigs and too much caffeine. And Landon thought he could break it and walk away laughing? He didn't know I'd been recording the hallway for months. He didn't know about the second living room camera I'd installed after the Amazon package started disappearing. And he definitely didn't know about the third camera, the one hidden inside the picture frame above the TV, the one he never even looked at. Only 2 of those cameras were visible, and only one of us knew about the third. For now, it took me nearly the entire weekend to get through the camera footage, not because it was hard to watch or difficult to operate. No, I've worked in enough digital marketing systems to know how to handle playback software, but because I had to do it in secret. In pieces, in those tiny quiet windows between breakfast and laundry. And hey Vanessa, can you take a look at this cable bill? Moments when Landon and Mom were out of the room. I couldn't afford to let them catch even a glimpse of what I was up to, not yet. Not until I knew for sure what I was looking at and what it meant. The video from the picture frame camera wasn't perfect, but it gave me just enough. You could see the couch, the coffee table, the spot where I always keep my laptop when I'm up late working and need a break from my desk. You could see Landon walk in, phone in one hand, envelope in the other, pacing like a man who's already made a bad decision and is trying to figure out how much worse it could get before anyone notices. He wasn't stumbling or tripping or even slightly off balance. He was angry. You could see it in the way he moved, the way he kept crumpling and uncrumpling the paper in his hand. His jaw clenched so tight I half expected his molars to explode. He didn't even hesitate. He walked straight over to the table, picked up the laptop like it was garbage he'd been ordered to throw out, and slammed it, full arm swing, onto the floor. No accident. No clumsy misstep. Just pure intent. And when it didn't break on the first hit, he picked it up and did it again. Then he took the envelope, ripped it into 3 jagged pieces, and shoved them into the trash can beneath the sink like he'd just committed some minor felony and was too dumb to cover his tracks properly. The entire scene was surreal to watch. This was a man I used to babysit, a boy I once pulled out of the neighbor's swimming pool when he was 5 and thought he could hold his breath like the kid on the swim team. Now here he was, a grown-ass man, destroying my work and pretending it was no big deal, like I was the crazy one for caring. But what caught my attention more than the violence was what happened right before it. Landon had stood there for a good 2 minutes, holding that envelope, reading it with his lips moving just a little. Some people do that when they're nervous, you know, mutter the words out loud like reading makes them real. And I could see part of the letterhead when he turned the paper toward the window light. It said something like Notice of Action and had the words Chase and Collections Department near the top. I paused the video and leaned in, squinting at the screen like I could zoom with my brain. My gut twisted because I suddenly realized what he had been doing wasn't random or impulsive. I remember buying that laptop back in June 2024. Wait, no, that doesn't make sense. That was 18 months ago, right? No, wait, it's only May now. So maybe, God, maybe it was more recent than I thought. The dates were starting to blur together, but I remembered ordering it after my divorce was finalized. I'd needed a fresh start, a better machine, something fast and new and mine. And Landon must have known that. He'd seen me working on it day in and day out. So why now? Why destroy it now? I kept watching the video, hands resting lightly on the mouse, ready to switch screens at the slightest creak of the hallway. And sure enough, about 30 minutes in, I heard Cheryl's voice outside the door, talking to herself like she always does when she's unloading groceries, and I quickly alt-tabbed to a spreadsheet I kept open as a decoy. When she peeked her head into the room and asked what I was doing, I told her I was watching an onboarding video from work, real boring stuff, and she just nodded and walked off like that was enough explanation. But as soon as she was gone, I flipped back to the footage and watched Landon rummage through the drawer in the hallway table, the one where I keep backup drives, receipts, old chargers, anything mildly electronic that I haven't decided to throw out yet. He pulled everything out, flipped through folders like he was searching for something specific, something he expected to find. And when he didn't, that's when he came into the living room and grabbed the laptop. That's when it hit me. He wasn't angry at me. He was afraid. Afraid of something he thought I had. Something he believed was stored on that machine. He didn't just break my laptop. He didn't just destroy a piece of equipment. He was trying to hide something. And he thought it was on there. It didn't take me long to realize that confronting Landon directly would never get me what I wanted. Not the truth, not an apology, not even a decent lie. Every conversation with him was a game of shifting goalposts, and our mother had long since decided that his version of reality was more palatable than mine. So if I wanted answers, if I wanted to know what he was hiding and what made him go full gorilla on my laptop, I had to stop playing honest. I had to become someone who watched from the shadows, someone who didn't ask but instead waited and listened and let the guilty do the talking themselves. That's where Jenny came in. Jenny with her IT job and her divorce-honed rage and her apartment full of backup batteries and Ethernet cords like she was stockpiling for a technological apocalypse. I called her the day after I finished the footage, while Landon was out with the car and Cheryl was in the backyard clipping roses she never remembered to water. Jenny didn't even ask questions, not at first. She just said, "Bring me the desktop and the dirty details. I'll have it done in an hour." I packed the tower into a laundry basket, covered it with towels, and drove it over like we were smuggling drugs. We worked side by side in her cluttered dining room for hours, installing screen capture software that ran invisibly in the background, setting up decoy folders with enticing names like Chase Account Records and Legal Settlements 2022, and her personal favorite, Vanessa Taxes Backpay _court order, which sounded juicy enough to lure any dumb hand with something to hide. We also set up a wireless trigger connected to a motion sensor above the door to my room, a neat little device Jenny insisted on testing with her cat 3 times before she was satisfied. "You want proof," she said, typing furiously while chewing on a pen cap. "Not suspicion. Proof changes the story." By the time I left her apartment that night, my machine was no longer a machine, it was bait. The next step required something I hated doing almost as much as lying, pretending to leave. I told Cheryl I was going to spend the weekend with Jenny, just a girls' trip, something light to clear my head, maybe catch a few thrift stores, drink a bottle of wine that costs more than $10. She smiled like she believed me, maybe because it made her life easier if I disappeared for a bit, and said something about how a little time away will do wonders for your nerves. That Friday night, I packed a bag with just enough visible items to make it believable, left the desktop on with the screen set to sleep, and walked out the front door with my keys jingling and my voice loud enough to carry. I drove around the block twice, then pulled into the driveway of my neighbor across the street, an older man named Earl who owed me more than a few favors after I'd driven him to his colonoscopy and never told a soul about it. He gave me the guest bedroom and a perfect view of my own house, and by 10 o'clock I was on his couch, barefoot, clutching a mug of lukewarm tea while my phone connected to the live camera feeds Jenny had linked up. At 11:34, the motion sensor pinged. My heart didn't just race, it practically threw itself against my ribs like it was trying to escape. I pulled up the screen and watched, in real time, as Landon crept into my room with the kind of clumsy silence only guilty people try to perform. He didn't turn the lights on, just used his phone flashlight, a jittery beam of light that bounced off walls and posters as he moved toward the desk. I watched as he sat down, jiggled the mouse, and waited for the screen to light up. He was already holding a USB stick, the red kind you get in multi-packs at Walmart, cheap and forgettable. His fingers moved fast. He wasn't looking around, wasn't hesitating. He knew what he was doing, and that scared me more than if he'd been fumbling. He clicked through my folders like he'd been there before, like he knew the map by heart. And when he found the one labeled Chase Account Records, he paused only for a moment before dragging it to his USB. The screen recorder caught everything, every click, every copied file, every flicker of his expression as he scrolled through fake documents Jenny had mocked up. Documents that looked convincingly like wire transfers and balance statements, accounts linked to names that didn't belong to me or anyone I knew. One of them was labeled Cheryl IRA, just to see how far he'd go. He copied that too. And then he did something I didn't expect. He opened one more folder, one labeled Insurance, Device Claims, and read it for a good minute before closing it quickly and looking around like maybe the laptop ghosts were watching him. Maybe he remembered what he told me, that I could just use the warranty. Maybe he was trying to figure out how much I knew or how much he didn't. He pulled out the USB, shut off the screen, and tiptoed out of my room like a child who'd stolen from the cookie jar. And I sat there on Earl's lumpy old couch, heart thumping like a war drum, watching my little brother commit what I could only describe now as digital burglary. He had no idea I was watching his every click. And what I saw next made my stomach turn. When I invited them to dinner, I made sure to say it just the right way, casual enough to avoid suspicion, but warm enough that Mom would take the bait without digging for motives. I told her I wanted to clear the air and move on, that maybe I'd overreacted about the laptop situation, that it was probably stress from work and the lingering fallout from the divorce. I even apologized, not because I meant it, but because it laid the trap in silk instead of nails. She said she'd bring dessert. Landon asked if lasagna was still my go-to, and I told them 6 o'clock sharp, no excuses. I made the house look cozy, played some low jazz in the background, lit a candle on the table not for ambience, but because I knew it would distract Mom just enough to stop her from asking too many questions at first. I made the lasagna exactly like she used to when we were kids, extra ricotta, spinach layered between the noodles, fresh basil on top just the way she liked it when she remembered to pretend she cared about vegetables. Landon came in first, smelling faintly of cologne and beer, like he'd put in just enough effort to look like he wasn't trying too hard. Cheryl followed, carrying a store-bought pie with a crooked smile and the kind of energy she reserved for family holidays and church bake sales. We ate mostly in silence at first, the clink of forks and the occasional slurp of soda filling the space where conversation should have lived. I let it simmer, let them get comfortable, let Landon drop his guard completely as he reached for a third helping, and Cheryl complimented my mature attitude for not holding a grudge. It was only after the plates were cleared, after Cheryl pushed back her chair and sighed that contented sigh she always did after a big meal, that I pulled the small silver flash drive from my pocket and laid it gently on the table like a loaded weapon with the safety off. "What's that?" she asked, blinking at it like it might blink back. "I want to show you both something," I said, rising from my seat and walking to the television where the HDMI cable already waited. Just a short clip. For closure. Landon looked up, already wary, his fork pausing midair. You're not gonna make us watch a TED Talk, are you? I didn't answer. I just plugged the drive into the TV and let the file open without a word. The screen flickered. The image came up. It was grainy, black and white, time-stamped in the top right corner, like every good piece of surveillance footage should be. There was the living room, plain as day, and there was Landon, pacing with the envelope in hand, face tight and twitchy, like a man one wrong word away from losing his grip. Cheryl gasped the moment she saw him grab the laptop and slam it into the ground. Landon's smile faltered. The sound was muted, but the violence didn't need audio to scream. The second hit was slower, more deliberate. Cheryl reached for her necklace, the one with the gold heart she wore like armor, and clutched it like it could protect her from the truth. "What is this?" she asked, voice shaking more than I expected. "Keep watching," I said, still standing, arms crossed tight against my chest. Next came the hallway footage, Landon digging through drawers, flipping folders, checking USB drives, muttering to himself, and eventually settling into the chair at my desk. The screen recording kicked in. Every click, every folder, every drag and drop operation lit up in full color. And then he opened Chase account records, browsed through the fake documents Jenny had designed to look juicy and just a little bit illegal, and copied the whole thing to his USB drive like a thief walking out of a department store with a coat full of perfume bottles. Cheryl covered her mouth. Landon stood up, knocking over his chair in the process. "What the hell is this?" he snapped, voice a full octave higher now. "You tell me," I said, walking back to the table slowly. "You seemed very interested in my financial history for someone who keeps saying this was an accident." "That's not real," he stammered. "That's not what happened." "No?" I asked, tilting my head, because it looks a lot like premeditated destruction of property followed by unauthorized access to my personal files. "She baited me," Landon shouted, pointing at the screen like it had betrayed him. "She planted that folder. This is entrapment or some shit." Cheryl turned toward him, her expression a strange mix of heartbreak and horror. "Landon," she said quietly, "why were you in her room at all?" He didn't answer. I clicked to the final scene, my real files, untouched, safe, protected by another layer he never reached, and then the screen filled with bold white letters on a black background. "Nice try, dipshit." Landon swore under his breath and stormed out of the house without even grabbing his jacket. The front door slammed so hard the candle flickered out on the table. Cheryl didn't follow him. She just sat there, eyes wet but not blinking, the pie still untouched in its plastic box beside her elbow. "I didn't know," she finally whispered, and for once, I believed her. Not because she hadn't seen the signs, but because she'd never wanted to. It's easier to love a son when you pretend he's a boy who just lost his way, not a man who's willing to steal from his sister to save his own skin. I didn't do it to ruin him. I did it because I've spent 40 years cleaning up after a brother who never once said thank you. And the best part? I didn't even need to show him the real footage. I had more. Much more. But some truths, they're better off simmering under the surface. For now.